I didn't catch her the first time, or the second. It was the third, when I stood in my son's bedroom, holding a burner phone I wasn't supposed to find, scrolling through messages I wasn't supposed to see, that the weight of my life cracked straight through my chest. My wife, Serafina, and my brother, Julian, had been sleeping together for 2 years. My children, my own blood, had known and helped them cover it up. They'd called me an obstacle, a bank account on legs, a joke. And in that moment, I realized the worst part wasn't the betrayal. It was that I hadn't seen it. I, Ethan Cole, the man who built Manhattan Towers from nothing, who negotiated billion-dollar deals with a handshake, had been a fool in his own home. And I wasn't angry. Not yet. I was something far colder. Ready. Before we dive into today's story, take a moment to let us know where you're watching from. We love seeing how our stories bring people together from all over the world. Your comments create a community where storytelling thrives, and we're so grateful to have you here. If you haven't already, be sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss a moment. Now, settle in, get comfortable, and prepare for a journey that will keep you hooked from start to finish. Let's get started. I didn't catch her the first time, or the second. It was the third, when I stood in my son's bedroom holding a burner phone I wasn't supposed to find, scrolling through messages I wasn't supposed to see, that the weight of my life cracked straight through my chest. Ethan Cole, 39 years old, real estate mogul, the man everyone wanted to know or be, stood alone in the dim light of his son's room, his fingers frozen around cold metal. His empire stretched across Manhattan, skyscrapers, luxury apartments, multi-million-dollar deals. His name carried weight at every gala, charity dinner, and business negotiation. But in that moment, none of it mattered. On the screen, lit up in cruel detail, were texts that destroyed everything. His wife, Serafina, the woman he'd adored since they were college kids, was not only sleeping with his younger brother, Julian, but had been for 2 years. 2 years. The photos weren't just suggestive, they were humiliating. They were in Ethan's bed, in Julian's apartment, even in one of Ethan's under-construction luxury projects downtown. But the photos weren't the worst part. It was the messages from Finn, his son, and Izzy, his daughter. Finn had been helping by deleting security camera footage. Izzy had been covering for her mother, giving alibis and running interference. They weren't clueless teens. They were collaborators. "Dad's clueless," Finn had texted Julian, followed by a laughing emoji. "Mom says we're almost there," Izzy had written. "Once the IPO goes through, they'll be free." Ethan felt his chest tighten, not the panic of heartbreak, but something deeper, colder, a detachment he'd never known he was capable of. He scrolled until his thumb ached, his heart flatlined. Then he calmly powered off the phone, put it back where he found it, and sat on the edge of his son's bed, staring at the floor. The sounds of his life drifted up the stairs. Serafina humming in the kitchen, Julian's familiar laugh floating through from the living room, Finn arguing over a video game downstairs, Izzy tapping away on her phone. For anyone else, it would sound like home. To Ethan, it sounded like theater. When he finally stood, his hands were steady. No confrontation, no dramatic scene. Not yet. Downstairs, Serafina looked up from a pot on the stove, glowing in that effortless way she always did at dinner. Her blonde hair pulled back, slim arms bare, a faint sheen on her skin from the heat of the kitchen. She smiled. "Hey, love, dinner's almost ready." Julian, perched on a stool at the marble island, lifted his glass in greeting. "Good day at work, big brother?" "Good," Ethan said smoothly, planting a kiss on Serafina's cheek, inhaling her familiar, expensive perfume. He grabbed a drink, settled beside Julian, even managed a quiet joke about a client he'd met that afternoon. Across the room, Finn and Izzy glanced up, smiling like the perfect children everyone envied. Inside, Ethan's mind worked with an engineer's precision, not panic, not grief, calculations. He ate dinner. He asked Finn about an upcoming influencer event, praised Izzy's grades, thanked Julian for his latest architectural designs on the Midtown project. When Serafina reached for his hand across the table, he squeezed hers, noting the way her eyes softened, the gentle press of her thumb. They all believed they were winning. That night, Serafina slipped into their shared bed wearing delicate silk, a scent of vanilla and amber curling through the air. She leaned against him, murmuring a soft, "I love you." Ethan kissed her shoulder. "I love you too," he whispered. And then, as she drifted into sleep, Ethan lay awake beside her, eyes open to the ceiling, feeling the weight of the room, of the house, of the entire life he had built, and now understood was a lie. The next morning, Ethan moved with the same calm. Coffee brewed. Finn rushed out the door. Izzy pouted over a canceled shopping trip. Julian texted from across the city. "Lunch later, bro." Ethan replied, "Sure." At his office, 40 floors above Park Avenue, he closed the door and called Gloria Chen, a divorce attorney whose name alone could make people tremble. "I need a meeting. Urgent." That afternoon, in a private corner office, Ethan told her everything. Gloria took notes carefully, her expression unreadable. "And you have evidence?" she asked softly. "I have evidence." His voice didn't shake. Gloria nodded once. "I'll pull a digital forensics team and a private investigator. This is bigger than just a marital issue, Ethan. If your brother's been using insider information, siphoning funds, sabotaging projects, it's criminal." The words landed hard and real, but Ethan didn't flinch. In fact, for the first time in 24 hours, he felt something close to solid ground under his feet. When he returned home that evening, Serafina greeted him with a bright smile and a kiss. Julian stopped by for a drink, and Finn joked about needing help with his social media contracts. Ethan smiled, joked, played the part. Inside, something colder and sharper had settled in his bones. He saw Serafina's gentle touches as manipulation, Julian's grin as arrogance, Finn's charm as a cover, Izzy's giggles as calculation. He watched them all like a man watching actors in a play whose ending he now knew. Late that night, standing at the window of his penthouse, Ethan looked out over the glowing Manhattan skyline, the one he had helped build, brick by brick, project by project. His reflection stared back, polished, powerful, and now, awake. They thought they had fooled him. They thought he was blind, weak, distracted. But Ethan Cole wasn't the man they thought he was. He was the man they were about to learn to fear. Before we dive into today's story, take a moment to let us know where you're watching from. We love seeing how our stories bring people together from all over the world. Your comments create a community where storytelling thrives, and we're so grateful to have you here. If you haven't already, be sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss a moment. Now, settle in, get comfortable, and prepare for a journey that will keep you hooked from start to finish. Let's get started. The next morning, Ethan Cole woke before dawn. He stood alone in the kitchen, the marble countertops cold under his palms, the house still and dim. Above him, the hum of the air system whispered through the penthouse, blending with the distant thrum of Manhattan far below. His coffee sat untouched on the counter, steam curling into the air and disappearing. In the other room, Serafina padded softly on bare feet, a silk robe trailing behind her as she entered with a soft smile. "Morning, love," she murmured, pressing a kiss to his cheek. Ethan turned, eyes calm, mouth easy. He kissed her back, wrapped his arms around her waist, and for all the world looked like a man deeply in love. Inside, His mind was already racing. He could feel his heartbeat, low and steady, as if his body knew he was preparing for war. By mid-morning, Ethan sat in a private meeting room at Gloria Chen's downtown law office. Gloria, elegant and composed in a tailored black suit, flipped through the files Ethan had handed over. Each page added weight to the case. Text screenshots, timestamps, security camera data, financial summaries. She read in silence, only the faint tap of her pen against the folder breaking the stillness. "You understand what this is, Ethan," Gloria said softly, looking up at last. "It's not just adultery, it's conspiracy. There's financial fraud here, internal sabotage. If this goes to court, you don't just walk away with a divorce. You walk away with the company, the assets, and their reputations in ash." Ethan exhaled, long and slow. "I know." Gloria gave a small, sharp nod. "I'll move carefully. Private investigators, digital forensic specialists, quiet asset reallocation. You're not just leaving, Ethan. You're cutting them off at the knees." For a man like Ethan Cole, betrayal wasn't just personal. It was professional. It was about empire. By afternoon, he was back at Cole Urban Properties, sitting across from his business partner, Marco Rossi, in a corner office with glass walls overlooking the city. Marco, loyal and shrewd, had been with him since the early days. Ethan trusted him, and in Manhattan, that meant something. "Marco," Ethan said quietly, "I need you to listen, and I need you to keep this between us." Marco frowned, leaning forward. "What's going on?" Ethan laid it out. The affair, the insider leaks, the siphoned contracts, the shell companies Julian had set up under the company's nose. Marco listened, his face darkening, hands clenched on the desk. "Jesus, Ethan. Are you sure?" Ethan gave a small, humorless smile. "I'm sure." Without a word, Marco got up, locked the office door, and sat back down. "Tell me what you need." That night, back at the penthouse, Ethan played his role perfectly. Dinner was laughter, wine, soft music. Serafina leaned into him at the table. Julian called with updates on a midtown development. Finn showed off new sponsorship deals, and Izzy chattered about an upcoming gala. Ethan smiled. He complimented Serafina's new dress. He gave Finn a proud nod. He promised Izzy they'd look at cars soon for her 17th birthday. Inside, his mind mapped every detail. It wasn't just the texts that had confirmed everything. It was what followed. The investigators Gloria had hired moved fast. Julian wasn't just having an affair. He was siphoning funds from Cole Urban Properties, transferring money into side projects hidden under fake business names. Finn wasn't just helping with alibis. He was leaking Ethan's project bids, undercutting his father's negotiations, and feeding Julian key competitor information. Izzy wasn't just distracted. She was quietly preparing to blackmail her father with fake evidence of infidelity, trying to force an early trust fund payout. Ethan watched them all now, his family, through a new lens, seeing every smile, every glance, every touch for what it was: strategy. That evening, after the house had quieted, Ethan stood at the window again, gazing out over the city. Behind him, Serafina was in their bedroom, brushing her hair, humming softly. The sound once comforted him. Now it filled him with cold detachment. His phone buzzed on the counter. A message from Marco. "Dummy project fed. Julian's lawyer already sniffing for IPO timelines." Ethan allowed himself a small, sharp breath. The bait was working. He turned off the lights, walked to the bedroom, slipped under the covers. Serafina snuggled into his side. "Love you," she murmured sleepily. "Love you too," Ethan whispered, staring at the ceiling. The next morning, Ethan tested the house. At breakfast, he casually mentioned, "I might be thinking about stepping back a little. Retirement, maybe." He watched them carefully. Finn's eyes lit up, a spark of excitement flickering. Izzy tilted her head, interest sharp. Serafina placed a delicate hand on his arm, voice soft. "Oh, darling, are you sure? You've worked so hard." An hour later, a message pinged across Julian's private channels, one the investigators were now quietly monitoring. "He's cracking. We can move sooner." Ethan sat in his office later that day, reviewing surveillance photos sent from the private investigator. He saw Serafina and Julian together, heads close, smiles private, planning. He saw Finn leaving an influencer event, phone in hand, thumbs flying over the screen. He saw Izzy on the phone with her friends, laughing, carefree. And for the first time, Ethan let himself feel it. Not grief, not anger. Something steelier. A sense of resolve he had never known he carried. This wasn't a family anymore. It was a takeover. A hostile one. That night, Ethan met Adrian Morrow at a Chelsea art gallery. An accidental encounter carefully engineered. Adrian, polished in a soft navy suit, smiled when he saw Ethan, but there was a tightness around his eyes. "Julian's been off," Adrian admitted over a glass of wine. "I keep thinking maybe it's me. Maybe I'm not enough." Ethan offered a polite, meaningless smile, but inside, a sharp note of sympathy flared. Adrian wasn't just a bystander. He was another casualty, another person Julian was using to prop up his double life. "I'm sure it's not you," Ethan said quietly. Adrian's laugh was brittle. "That's kind, Ethan. But I think we both know Julian only loves himself." When Ethan returned home that night, Serafina greeted him with a warm kiss. Julian texted, "Great seeing you today, big brother." "Let's meet soon." Finn and Izzy were sprawled on the couch, watching a movie, the picture of casual innocence. Ethan smiled, told them good night, and headed to his study. There, alone under the soft pool of lamplight, Ethan opened a folder Gloria had delivered earlier that day. Julian's business filings, Finn's wire transfers, Izzy's message threads, Serafina's burner phone bills. He flipped through each one, methodically, noting every detail. His fingers didn't tremble. They thought he was blind. They thought he was predictable. They thought they were winning. But Ethan Cole was no longer the man they believed he was. He was no longer the man they had betrayed. He was something else now. A man who was going to dismantle them, piece by piece, while they watched, smiling, unaware of the fire building beneath their feet. He closed the folder gently, leaned back in his chair, and looked at the city beyond the window. Not yet, he thought, but soon. And when it came, they would never see it coming. Ethan Cole had never been a man to doubt himself, at least, not until now. For weeks he moved through his days like a man wearing a mask, flawless, smiling, calm. On the surface, nothing had changed. He still left for the Cole Urban Properties offices at 8 sharp, still kissed Serafina goodbye at the door, still clapped Julian on the back when they crossed paths at the office. To the outside world, they were still the Cole dynasty, the perfect power family of Manhattan. Inside, however, Ethan had become something else entirely. Gone was the man who had once longed for peace at the dinner table, for his children's approval, for his wife's affection. In his place stood a strategist, watching, testing, waiting. The man who had built half the city now focused all that precision and patience on the one thing that truly mattered, dismantling the betrayal inside his own home. It started small. At a board meeting, Ethan casually introduced a new operational restructure. Julian, ever the golden architect, smiled his easy smile, leaned back in his chair, and didn't notice that the restructure stripped him of any real decision-making power. Marco Rossi, Ethan's longtime business partner, watched from across the table, eyes sharp, giving the faintest nod. They were in this together now. At home, Ethan played his role to perfection. He took Serafina out to 11 Madison Park for dinner, smiling over a bottle of vintage Bordeaux as she touched his hand and laughed at stories she no longer really listened to. He complimented Izzy on her outfit for the upcoming gala, clapped Finn on the back when he boasted about another sponsorship deal. He kept Julian close, inviting him for drinks after work, nodding along to ideas for the Midtown development project they were supposedly collaborating on. But behind the scenes, Ethan was tightening the noose. The private investigators Gloria Chen had hired worked quietly and fast. They traced Julian's shell companies, uncovering how money meant for Cole Urban Properties projects was being funneled into separate accounts. Finn's insider leaks were documented in brutal detail. Text messages forwarding bid numbers, emails sharing timelines, even overheard conversations passed along to Julian and Serafina. The more Ethan uncovered, the more a strange detachment settled over him. Not grief, not heartbreak, something sharper, something like clarity. They weren't just unfaithful. They were thieves. They were conspirators. They were enemies sitting at his own table, smiling, laughing, plotting his downfall as if he were too blind to see. One night, at a charity gala in Chelsea, Ethan crossed paths with Adrian Morrow again. He hadn't planned it this way, at least that's what he told himself, but part of him had known Adrian would be there. Julian's husband, elegant and soft-spoken, ran a successful art gallery downtown. He was Julian's opposite in every way, measured where Julian was impulsive, genuine where Julian was performative. They found themselves standing side by side at the bar, glasses in hand, watching the crowd swirl around them. "Ethan," Adrian said with a quiet smile. "Good to see you." "You too." Ethan's voice was easy, but his chest tightened at the vulnerability he saw flicker across Adrian's face. "Julian's been working late a lot," Adrian murmured, staring down into his glass. "I keep telling myself it's just the projects, that I'm just being paranoid." Ethan studied him for a moment. "You're not paranoid." Adrian looked up sharply, eyes wide. For the first time, Ethan let the mask slip, just a fraction. "If you ever need to talk," he said softly, "I'm here." That night, Ethan lay awake long after Serafina had fallen asleep beside him. He stared at the ceiling, hearing her slow, contented breathing, and thought of Adrian's face at the bar, his confusion, his dawning fear, his heartbreak. And for the first time since this had all started, Ethan realized something that chilled him to the bone. They weren't just betraying him. They were destroying Adrian too. Over the next week, the final pieces fell into place. Ethan fed Marco carefully designed false intel about a new luxury project. As expected, nothing leaked. Marco was solid. Then Ethan floated the same intel at home over dinner, mentioning it casually as Finn scrolled through his phone and Izzy half-listened between texts. Within 24 hours, the information had reached Julian's lawyer. The trap was working. Gloria's legal team finalized the divorce filings, backing them with irrefutable evidence of infidelity, financial sabotage, and ethical misconduct. Marco and Ethan quietly secured board votes that would leave Julian stripped of executive power, his shares diluted to insignificance. The IPO papers that Serafina and Julian had been counting on as their golden parachute were quietly, ruthlessly shut down. Ethan played the part of the loving husband and brother until the very end. He laughed over family dinners. He kissed Serafina goodnight. He helped Finn draft a pitch for a new sponsorship deal. He promised Izzy they'd test drive cars soon. He even clinked glasses with Julian over cocktails, toasting to family, to the future. Inside, he counted down the days. Inside, the clock was ticking. 2 days before the Cole Foundation's spring gala, Adrian called. It was late, past midnight, and Ethan was sitting in his study, papers spread around him, the glow of the city outside his window. Ethan. Adrian's voice trembled slightly on the line. I found something. Ethan sat forward, heart tight. What is it? Adrian exhaled shakily. Julian's phone. I saw the messages. It's Serafina. And others. Men. Women. I don't know how I didn't see it. Ethan closed his eyes briefly, pressing a hand to his mouth. I'm so sorry, Adrian whispered. For everything. Don't be, Ethan said quietly. We're both victims of the same man. There was a long pause on the line. Then, softly, Adrian asked, What are you going to do? Ethan's eyes opened slowly, gaze steady as the city lights flickered beyond the glass. End it, he said. The night of the gala was a masterpiece of theater. The Met rooftop sparkled under strings of golden lights. Celebrities, politicians, and socialites mingled, glasses of champagne in hand, murmuring about deals, designs, and the next big thing. Ethan and Serafina arrived together, the picture-perfect couple, flashing smiles for the cameras. Julian floated through the crowd like a prince, charm turned to full wattage. Marco was there, keeping an eye on the corporate side. Adrian arrived alone, pale but composed, his presence both elegant and quietly defiant. As the night reached its glittering peak, Ethan stepped onto the small stage at the center of the terrace, lifting his glass for a toast. The crowd turned toward him, laughter and conversation fading into a hush. Ethan smiled, voice warm. Thank you all for being here tonight to celebrate not just success, but integrity, to honor not just ambition, but accountability. A flicker of confusion moved through the crowd. Ethan's smile didn't waver. And tonight, I want to toast not just to the future of Cole Urban Properties, but to truth, the kind that withstands anything, even betrayal. And then, like clockwork, the buzz started. Phones vibrating, screens lighting up, whispers darting through the crowd like sparks on dry grass. On every major gossip site, social feed, and headline, the leak hit. Photos of Serafina and Julian. Financial records of the embezzlement. Testimonies from investigators. Evidence of Finn's and Izzy's involvement. Serafina turned sharply, face draining of color. Julian froze mid-step, his drink trembling in his hand. Finn and Izzy, watching from home, began frantically calling, texting, as their world detonated in real time. Ethan raised his glass, finishing softly, "To those who know that trust is not a game." The crowd erupted, not in applause, but in shocked, electric noise. Ethan stepped down, walking calmly through the sea of whispers and stares. Adrian met his eyes across the room, giving the faintest, most solemn nod. That night, back at the penthouse, Ethan packed his last bag. The papers had been filed, the assets secured, the company cleaned. His private jet waited at the airfield. As he stood in the doorway, glancing one last time at the home that had been his pride, his prison, and his battlefield, he allowed himself a single thought. They thought they were burying me, but they were only building the man who would bury them. He left the wedding ring on the counter. He left the note. And without a sound, Ethan Cole walked out the door. The headlines hit the next morning. Ethan Cole didn't need to read them. He knew what they said. He'd made sure of it. Cole family scandal. Billionaire betrayed by wife and brother. Julian Cole's fall from grace. Architect, lover, fraudster. Serafina Cole, from Manhattan's it girl to elite outcast. Ethan sat alone on the leather armchair in the Malibu rental, watching the Pacific waves roll in slow and steady. The sun was barely up, but his phone had already vibrated off the nightstand 3 times. He didn't bother to check it, He knew the script now. He had written it. They would be calling Serafina, Julian, Finn, Izzy. They'd be begging, bargaining, blaming. But Ethan had gone quiet, unreachable, legally insulated. His number was deactivated. His life had shifted 10,500 miles west overnight, and not a soul in New York had seen it coming. 2 days earlier, in Manhattan, the stage had been set. After the gala exploded into scandal, after the whispered gasps, after Serafina fled the rooftop in tears, and Julian shoved his way through the crowd trying to make calls no one would answer, Ethan had gone home. Calmly, methodically, he'd packed his bags. He wasn't angry. He wasn't shaking. He was ready. Every personal item had already been quietly replaced. Originals shipped to Malibu, copies left behind. The penthouse would close in a week, the paperwork finalized by his legal team. By the time Serafina realized what was gone, Ethan would be gone too. That last night, as the city glittered outside, he left a single note on the marble kitchen counter. You made your choice. I made mine. Next to it, his wedding ring. Simple. Final. Now, in Malibu, the ocean stretched endlessly in front of him. The California air smelled of salt and eucalyptus, and the house was everything Manhattan wasn't. Airy, simple, quiet. Marco Rossi called around noon. Ethan answered. They're spiraling, Marco said, skipping any greeting. Julian tried to show up at the office today. Security walked him out. He's been cut from the board. We filed the fraud notice. Gloria says legal papers hit his apartment by end of day. Ethan let out a slow breath. Good. Serafina? Marco asked. She's done. Her accounts are frozen. The house sale closes Friday. Jesus, Marco muttered. Then after a pause, and the kids? Ethan's jaw tightened. They'll figure it out. Back in Manhattan, Serafina's world collapsed. The charity boards she once ruled over dropped her name overnight. Sponsors canceled. Brands that had sent her designer gowns and luxury handbags to flaunt at events quietly ghosted her. Her friends, those sleek, sharp women who lived in glass penthouses and Hamptons estates, stopped answering her calls. Her social media, once glowing with filtered perfection, turned vicious. Comments poured in by the hundreds. Guess money can't buy loyalty, huh? Poor little rich girl crying in her penthouse. I knew she was trash the moment I met her. Serafina, for the first time in her life, was irrelevant. Julian's downfall was even faster. Architectural boards issued suspensions. Developers yanked contracts. His name was stripped from projects he'd once bragged about designing. The calls he made to old allies went unanswered. Even his own assistant resigned. Adrian Morrow, Julian's now estranged husband, moved swiftly too. Backed by Gloria Chen's legal precision and Ethan's evidence, Adrian filed for divorce, seizing half of Julian's personal assets and publicly distancing himself in a press statement. Betrayal, professional misconduct, and personal violations have left no choice. I am focusing on rebuilding my life with integrity. And then, there were Finn and Izzy. Finn had tried to access his trust fund to put down a deposit for a luxury apartment, only to find the account frozen. Calls to his father went nowhere. His influencer sponsors pulled deals, not wanting to be attached to the scandal. Izzy, panicking, tried to arrange tuition for her elite prep school's study abroad program, only to find the credit cards declined. She called, texted, left voicemails. Daddy, please, I didn't mean to. I didn't know it would get this bad. But Ethan heard none of it. In Malibu, Ethan walked barefoot across the cool slate floors of the house, coffee in hand, the ocean breeze curling through the open doors. Marco sent regular updates. Gloria forwarded legal briefings. And Ethan, for the first time in his adult life, allowed himself to exhale. He wasn't smiling. He wasn't gloating. He was simply free. The only call he answered that week, besides Marco's and Gloria's, was Adrian's. Adrian's voice on the line was soft, tentative. "I just wanted to say thank you," Adrian said quietly, "for helping me see the truth." Ethan leaned against the terrace railing, gazing out at the pale blue line of horizon. "We were both used, Adrian. You didn't owe me anything." There was a pause. I'm thinking about moving west," Adrian said. "Fresh start." Ethan felt something shift in his chest. Not romance, not yet, but something like recognition, like two survivors finding each other in the wreckage. "Let me know when you get here," Ethan said simply. By the weekend, the media storm reached its peak. The headlines were relentless. Cole Dynasty collapses, betrayal, lies, and the fall of Manhattan's golden family. From power couple to pariah, Serafina Cole, shunned by NYC's elite. Julian Cole's career in ruins after scandal. Finn's name trended briefly on Twitter as former friends and sponsors dragged him for arrogance, for privilege, for crumbling under pressure. Izzy's prep school issued a formal statement distancing itself from the family, citing standards of conduct. Ethan watched none of it. Instead, he spent his mornings running on the beach, his afternoons in meetings for the eco-luxury project he and Marco were launching, and his evenings sitting quietly on the terrace, feeling his body learn how to be still again. One night, Marco flew out to meet with him. They sat by the fire pit, whiskey glasses in hand, the sound of the waves below. "You did it," Marco said, shaking his head. "You actually pulled it off." Ethan gave a faint smile. "I didn't pull anything off, Marco. They did." Marco looked at him sideways. "You ever think about going back to Manhattan?" Ethan let the question hang in the air for a long moment. "No," he said finally. "That chapter's closed." The next day, Finn and Izzy showed up. They didn't call ahead. They arrived on the doorstep of the Malibu house, pale, anxious, smaller than Ethan remembered them. "Dad," Finn started, eyes glassy. We need to talk." Ethan stood in the doorway, arms crossed. "I'm sorry," Izzy blurted, voice trembling. "We were stupid. We thought it was just games," Ethan finished quietly. They both nodded, miserable. Ethan stepped outside, closing the door behind him. "I don't hate you," he said evenly, "but I won't save you." Finn's eyes widened. "Dad? Come on, we're your kids." "You're adults," Ethan said. "You made adult choices. You get adult consequences." He offered them a deal, clear and cold. Finn could work for Marco's company starting from the bottom. Manual labor, no shortcuts. Izzy could return to school, but only if she proved she could handle her own life. Neither option included trust funds, luxury apartments, or family bailouts. "I'm done rescuing people who don't respect me," Ethan said quietly. He left them standing there, stunned, and went back inside. That night, as the sky turned dark and the ocean glittered with moonlight, Ethan sat on the terrace, a blanket around his shoulders, a glass of whiskey in hand. Adrian called. "I'm here," Adrian said softly. "I'm in Malibu." For the first time in a long time, Ethan smiled. Small, real, tired, but alive. "Good," he said. And for the first time, he meant it. Ethan Cole didn't remember falling asleep. He only remembered waking up. The Malibu sun poured through the floor-to-ceiling windows, washing the room in pale gold. For a moment, there was silence, the kind of silence Ethan hadn't known in years. No ringing phones, no rushed meetings, no text notifications, just the sound of waves breaking on the rocks below. He sat up slowly, running a hand through his hair, and let the stillness settle into his bones. This was his life now, not the polished Manhattan empire, not the Instagram-perfect family, not the cold, meticulous machine of Cole Urban Properties. This, the quiet. He poured coffee and stepped onto the terrace. His phone sat on the table beside him, screen blank, battery full. He hadn't turned it on yet, hadn't checked the news, hadn't opened the endless flood of messages. He didn't need to. The world he'd left behind was burning, and for once, Ethan wasn't the one trying to control the fire. 3 days earlier, Manhattan had been chaos. Serafina had tried everything. She'd called Ethan's lawyer, Gloria Chen, sobbing, furious, pleading. She'd gone to Marco Rossi, demanding explanations. She'd even tried calling the media, pitching a misunderstood wife angle, but the tabloids already had what they wanted. Serafina Cole, the cheating heiress who lost everything. Julian fared no better. He had stormed into the Cole Urban Properties offices, demanding meetings, threatening lawsuits, shouting in the lobby until security escorted him out. His inbox filled with termination notices, project cancellations, personal lawsuits. By the time Adrian's divorce papers landed on his doorstep, Julian was a man undone. Finn and Izzy, once Manhattan's golden kids, were stranded. Finn's influencer contracts evaporated overnight. Sponsors issued statements cutting ties. His carefully curated social presence, shirtless beach photos, designer hauls, smug captions, was flooded with laughing emojis, brutal comments, and screenshots of his family's collapse. Izzy, heartbroken and furious, found her social circle shrinking fast. Friends stopped texting. Classmates whispered. Teachers stared. Her study abroad program evaporated. The credit card on file declined. She left voicemail after voicemail for Ethan, each one more desperate than the last. But Ethan? He was already gone. By the time the last of his Manhattan properties sold, Ethan had been in Malibu for a week. Marco handled the paperwork. Gloria finalized the settlements. Ethan stayed out of sight, building something new, not a company, not yet, but a foundation, meetings with architects, calls with environmental consultants, plans for an eco-luxury development along the California coast. And when the days ended, when the sun fell below the horizon and the house turned quiet, Ethan sat on the terrace, watching the sea. It was here, in the dark, that he finally let himself feel it. Not victory, not triumph, freedom. The first time Adrian Morrow came by, it wasn't planned. Ethan was walking back from a meeting when he saw Adrian sitting on the steps of the house, a paper bag beside him, looking hesitant but determined. "I heard you like whiskey," Adrian said quietly. Ethan raised an eyebrow but smiled. "Come in." They sat outside, the bottle between them, the ocean stretching out under the stars. Adrian spoke first. "I thought I knew who he was." Ethan nodded, staring at the glass in his hand. "So did I." They drank in silence for a while, listening to the waves. "Do you ever feel stupid?" Adrian asked suddenly, his voice raw. "Like, how did I not see it?" Ethan let out a breath that was half a laugh, half a sigh. "Every day." Adrian looked over at him. "But you did see it. You just did something about it." Ethan turned, meeting his eyes. And for a moment, something settled between them. Not romantic, not yet, but real. Recognition. Survival. Back in Manhattan, the fallout only deepened. Serafina, cornered and desperate, fled to Europe, chasing investors, trying to reinvent herself in circles that no longer wanted her. Her calls to Finn and Izzy grew less frequent, more frantic. Her once daily Instagram posts stopped altogether. Julian, humiliated and broke, holed up in a friend's spare apartment, blacklisted by his own industry. The firms that had once courted him for designs now cited integrity concerns. The awards he'd once flaunted gathered dust. Finn, under pressure, took a part-time job at a tech startup, the influencer checks gone. He posted less and less, watching his follower count drop. Izzy, back in school, faced classmates who used to envy her and now only pitied her. And Ethan? He kept building. The eco-luxury project took shape faster than expected. Investors trusted Ethan. He had nothing left to prove, no reputation to chase. Marco flew in regularly, managing the practicals. Adrian, too, began appearing more often, offering insight, sharing quiet drinks, sometimes staying late, sometimes staying over. But Ethan never rushed it. He didn't want to fall back into old patterns of needing, of rescuing, of being needed. What he wanted now was something simpler, cleaner, choice. One afternoon, weeks after the media storm had quieted, Finn and Izzy returned. They stood at the edge of the terrace, awkward and unsure. Ethan leaned against the railing, arms crossed, saying nothing. Izzy spoke first. "We're sorry," she said, voice thin. "We were dumb and selfish. And we thought Mom and Uncle Julian—" She broke off. Finn rubbed a hand over his face. "We messed up, Dad." Ethan watched them carefully, feeling a strange mixture of ache and distance. "You made your choices," he said calmly. Izzy's eyes filled. Finn's jaw tightened. Ethan let the words hang. Then, slowly, he offered them a deal. Finn could work for Marco's team, starting from the bottom, no shortcuts. Izzy could finish school, funded only if she kept a job, paid part of her tuition herself, and proved she could stand on her own. No more trust funds, no more handouts. "I love you," Ethan said quietly. "But love without respect isn't love, it's weakness." They left, subdued, shaken. That night, Ethan sat on the terrace, watching the moon rise. Adrian joined him, 2 glasses in hand. "You're different with them," Adrian said softly. Ethan smiled faintly. "I'm different with everyone." They clinked glasses, sat back, and let the silence settle. At the edge of his mind, Ethan thought of Serafina, of Julian, of the life he'd left. And for the first time, the memory didn't feel sharp or aching. It felt like something finished, something past. They had wanted to break him. Ethan Cole sat at the long glass dining table, the Malibu sun pouring in behind him, his coffee cooling untouched at his side. He stared at the silent phone in front of him. Not a buzz, not a ring, nothing. It had been 3 weeks since Finn and Izzy had flown back to New York after their awkward, tearful visit. 3 weeks since Serafina had stopped trying to reach him. 3 weeks since Julian, disgraced and ruined, had disappeared from public view. Ethan thought the silence might have felt hollow, but it didn't. It felt earned. That afternoon, a call came through, not from Manhattan, not from Marco, not from Gloria, but from Adrian Morrow. "I'm here," Adrian said softly, voice steady but uncertain. "In Malibu." Ethan exhaled, a faint smile touching the edge of his mouth. "Good," he murmured. They met for dinner, nothing flashy, just 2 men at a quiet seaside restaurant, the waves audible even through the glass walls. Adrian looked tired but freer, his usually sharp style softened. No tailored jacket tonight, no designer watch, just a man trying to rebuild. They didn't talk about Serafina or Julian. Not right away. They talked about the coast, about art, about the business Ethan was building, an eco-luxury project that was turning heads faster than expected. Investors trusted Ethan. More importantly, he trusted himself. Later, over coffee, Adrian leaned back and said quietly, "You ever think about what you lost?" Ethan hesitated, then shook his head. "I think about what I almost lost. That's different." Adrian studied him, something like respect flickering across his face. You scare me a little. You know that? Ethan smiled faintly. You're not the first to say it. But under the smile was something gentler, something neither of them had words for yet. The next morning, Gloria Chen called. We got the final ruling, she said briskly. Julian's defamation countersuit against Adrian. All thrown out. Adrian's defamation suit against Julian? Approved. Settlement terms are heavy. He's bankrupt. Ethan closed his eyes briefly, pinching the bridge of his nose. Good. You sure you don't want to take a piece? Gloria asked. You're owed. I'm already paid, Ethan said softly. By the end of the week, the final report came in from Marco. Julian Cole, once Manhattan's darling architect, magazine-featured designer, party guest of the year, was blacklisted. Firms didn't want his name on their projects. Suppliers wouldn't extend credit. Former friends ignored his calls. Even his own family, their family, had quietly turned their backs. Serafina, once a fixture in charity circuits and influencer dinners, was living out of a borrowed villa in southern France, her brand endorsements gone, her charity positions dissolved. Every attempt at a comeback was met with polite but firm rejection. Ethan stood at the terrace railing that night, wind ruffling his hair, and thought not about revenge, not even about justice. He thought about peace. He had learned something brutal and beautiful in all of this. Peace wasn't something given. It was something taken, something claimed, after the fires had burned everything unnecessary to ash. A few days later, Finn called again. This time, Ethan answered. Dad, Finn said, breathless, anxious. I'm doing the work. I'm trying. Marco says I'm actually decent at it. Ethan listened, saying nothing. I just wanted you to know, Finn added, softer. I get it now. Ethan's chest tightened faintly, but his voice stayed calm. Good. And then, gently but firmly, don't stop. Finn hesitated, then exhaled. I won't. When the call ended, Ethan sat for a long time, staring at the black screen, feeling a pull he couldn't name. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet, but it was something like hope. Izzy, on the other hand, sent emails. Short ones at first. Hi, Dad, I miss you. Then longer, updates about school, about how she was working part-time at a boutique, about the therapy sessions she'd started, her idea, not anyone else's. Ethan read every word. He never replied. Not yet. Adrian came by again that weekend. This time, he stayed longer. They sat by the fire pit late into the night, sharing stories neither had told anyone else. Not about Julian, not about Serafina, but about themselves, their ambitions, their mistakes, their scars. At one point, Adrian said softly, You know, we're allowed to want things again. Ethan didn't answer right away, but when he did, it was honest. I know, he said quietly. I'm just learning how. Meanwhile, the world moved on. Manhattan found new scandals, new power couples, new headlines. The Cole family saga faded into the background, a once hot story cooling into a cautionary tale. But Ethan didn't care. He wasn't interested in Manhattan anymore. He wasn't interested in reclaiming a throne. He was interested in building something that couldn't be bought or stolen. The night before the eco-luxury project broke ground, Marco flew in. They toasted with bourbon on the terrace, Ethan barefoot, Marco laughing at the California air. You ever think you'd end up here? Marco asked, raising his glass. Ethan thought for a moment, then smiled. Not here, he admitted, but somewhere better. When Marco left, Adrian stayed. They didn't call it anything, not yet. It wasn't a relationship. It was two people sitting side by side, watching the ocean. both knowing what it felt like to be gutted and to survive. That night, Ethan stood at the window long after Adrian had gone to bed, staring out at the waves, the moon cutting a silver path across the water. He thought of Finn, working construction under Marco. He thought of Izzy, balancing classes and part-time jobs. He thought of Serafina, clinging to a fading spotlight. He thought of Julian, blaming the ruins of his life on everyone but himself. And then, finally, he thought of himself. The man he'd been, husband, father, brother, provider, was gone. But what had taken his place wasn't bitter or broken. It was whole. Ethan Cole had learned something no money, no marriage, no empire could teach. That sometimes survival isn't about holding on. It's about knowing exactly when to let go. Ethan Cole stood on the terrace of his Malibu home, the ocean breeze carrying the faint scent of salt and jasmine. The sky was a canvas of orange and pink, the sun dipping slowly behind the horizon, as if signaling the end of one chapter and the quiet promise of another. He took a deep breath, the kind that fills your lungs and settles the storm inside your chest. For the first time in years, Ethan felt at peace, not because the pain had vanished, but because he had made peace with it. The past was a mosaic of shattered trust and broken dreams, but it was also the foundation of who he had become. A man forged in betrayal, tempered by resilience, and reborn through hard choices. His phone buzzed softly on the side table. A message from Adrian. "Dinner tonight. I found a new gallery opening in Santa Monica. Thought you might like it." Ethan smiled. It was simple. It was real. He thought back to the life he'd left behind, the sprawling penthouse on Park Avenue, the glossy boardrooms, the smiling faces masking deceit. Serafina, once the dazzling socialite, now a shadow drifting through Parisian streets, chasing a fading spotlight. Julian, a cautionary tale whispered in architectural circles, burned by his own hubris and selfishness. Finn and Izzy, learning the hard lessons of adulthood, slowly carving out their own paths without the safety net they once took for granted. Ethan had given them all the truth and the consequences. He hadn't done it out of cruelty. He had done it out of love, love for himself, love for what remained unbroken inside him, and love for the future he still had the power to shape. As the evening deepened, Ethan walked inside, the quiet of the house wrapping around him like a familiar embrace. The walls held no memories of laughter or lies, only the promise of new beginnings. He poured a glass of bourbon, savoring the amber warmth as it slid down his throat. The phone buzzed again, another message from Adrian, a smiley face this time. Ethan sat down by the window, looking out at the stars beginning to scatter across the night sky. He thought about what he'd lost, yes, but more importantly, he thought about what he'd gained: freedom, strength, a second chance. And as the moonlight shimmered over the endless ocean, Ethan Cole closed his eyes and whispered to himself, "I'm ready." In life, there are moments that break us, and moments that remake us. The sharp edges of betrayal, the crushing weight of abandonment, and the bitter sting of injustice are wounds that cut deep, wounds that change the very core of who we are. Yet it is within those very fractures that resilience is born, and from those shattered pieces, a new self can emerge, stronger and wiser than before. What this journey teaches us is that trust, once broken, is never truly restored in the same way. It's reshaped, sometimes hardened, sometimes softened by time, but never quite the same as before. The betrayal of those closest to us is a profound rupture, a violent upheaval of the foundations we believed unshakable. But it also reveals the depth of our own strength and capacity for renewal. Choosing to walk away, to let go of what once was, is not an act of weakness, but one of courage. It is an acknowledgement that some chapters must end, not for revenge or spite, but for the preservation of self and the possibility of new beginnings. In the aftermath of loss, there is a space, a quiet, often uncomfortable space, where healing begins. It is here that we find clarity, a sense of freedom that can never be taken away. To forgive is a personal choice, but forgiveness is never owed to those who have broken us. Forgiveness does not mean forgetting or excusing harm. Rather, it is about reclaiming peace and refusing to be defined by the pain inflicted upon us. Forgiving ourselves for not seeing the signs sooner, for trusting too much, or for staying too long is just as vital. It is part of the human journey, fraught with complexity and nuance. This story reminds us that life is a fragile balance between love and betrayal, loyalty and deception, power and vulnerability. The choices we make, how we respond to adversity, how we rebuild after being torn down, define not just our fate, but our character. True victory is not measured by how much we destroy, but by how we rise from the ashes, how we rebuild with integrity, and how we reclaim our narrative on our own terms. In the end, no one is truly alone. Even in the darkest moments, connection remains possible, sometimes in unexpected forms, sometimes through new relationships forged in the fires of shared pain and mutual understanding. The capacity to trust again, to open oneself to love and friendship after profound hurt, is the ultimate act of bravery. If there is one truth that resonates beyond the specific details of any story, it is this: we are all deserving of respect, honesty, and dignity. When those are taken from us, we owe it to ourselves to stand firm, to demand accountability, and to never settle for less than we deserve. Thank you for joining us on this journey, one that explores the depths of human emotion, the complexities of family and betrayal, and the power of self-reclamation. Your presence here means the world, and your thoughts and reflections enrich this shared experience. Please take a moment to share where you're watching from in the comments below. Your stories and voices create the fabric of our community, reminding us all that none of us walk these paths alone. If you haven't already, please subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss a story that challenges, inspires, and moves you. From all of us here, thank you for being part of this journey. We look forward to walking the road ahead with you.